Greetings, mathophiles, and welcome to a video in which I'll be giving short summaries and reviews of 4 books that I think are particularly useful, particularly helpful for students of math or just people who want to understand math and math learning. The first is a book called Make It Stick: The Science of Successful Learning. And this is a book that changed my practice when I read it after it came out a few years ago. It was written by a writer named Peter C. Brown and 2 psychology professors from Washington University in St. Louis, Henry L. Roediger III and Mark A. McDaniel. And it focuses on issues of memory in learning. It's full of useful advice on strategies that work and on strategies that don't work so well. One of the things that seems to be just the bomb for learning facts, formulas, theorems, things that you just need to sort of commit to memory is a thing called retrieval practice. And basically it involves rehearsing, practicing the recall of information using flashcards or quizzes or tests or other similar such methods. I'll have a video specifically addressing that will be up before too long, and I'll place a link to it in the description for this one. Some things that don't work so well that you might think would. Rereading textbooks, rereading notes, seems to not be very effective. And in fact, it makes you vulnerable to a thing called the illusion of mastery. And the idea behind this is that you look at the material, you say to yourself, oh yes, that's familiar. Oh yes, I know that. But then later on, when you have to actually perform without any sort of assistance, without nets, so to speak, without formula sheets or what have you, that's a more difficult task. And you may not have been prepared for that by the simple rereading. The second book I really recommend for learners of math is one called A Mind for Numbers: How to Excel at Math and Science, Even If You Flunked Algebra. Written by Barbara Oakley, who is a PhD engineer and professor. She's been a practicing engineer. She's a very, very capable professional in the world of STEM, but she started out not liking math, not enjoying it, not having succeeded at it. In fact, she grew up hating it. And it's worth reading this book just for her backstory. She ended up enlisting in the army, learning Russian, getting a degree in Slavic languages. She was transferred to the Signal Corps, and she was placed in a position where she really had to know a fair amount of math. And so she decided to embrace it, and she decided to teach herself how to learn math. And most of the rest of the book is what she managed to learn in the course of that. She talks about a thing called chunking, which basically is to combine facts or bits of knowledge into larger themes that connect them. Seems to make it easier to organize and recall them. Talks about retrieval practice and other memory tips. There's sections on avoiding procrastination. If you are subject to that in the course of your schoolwork or in your life otherwise, you may want to check this book out for that reason. The price alone is justified by a section entitled 10 Rules for Good Studying and 10 Rules for Bad Studying. Highly recommend this book. Third, we have a book called Mindset: The New Psychology of Success. And this had enough popular attention that it's a book you may have heard of, or you may have had teachers make some reference to these concepts. Written by a developmental psychologist at Stanford by the name of Carol Dweck. And the big distinction that she draws is one between what she calls fixed mindsets and growth mindsets. The idea behind a fixed mindset is that it sees intelligence or competence as things that are sort of innate and stable and not subject to further development. People with fixed mindsets, according to Dweck, tend to avoid challenges because the risk of failure threatens their fixed view of their intelligence or of their competence. If I try this thing that really stretches me, I might fail at it. And what does that mean for my self-image that I have built up around the idea that it's not really changeable? She contrasts that with a growth mindset, which sees skills and even intelligence, if you will, and so on, as capable of being expanded by expending effort. Folks with growth mindsets, according to Dweck, tend to seek challenges because they represent opportunities for growth, and these challenges then, wait for it, enable them to grow. Some critics have said that she tries to explain too much by means of this idea, but to me, it's very persuasive when it's applied to education and skill development generally. Last but not least, we have a book called Whistling Vivaldi, How Stereotypes Affect Us and What We Can Do, written by another psychology professor at Stanford by the name of Claude and Steele. And he addresses what has been called identity threat or stereotype threat. And the idea behind this is that people who have been subjects of negative stereotypes, and there are a lot of them out there in the world of math involving students of color, involving women and girls, they're garbage, they're destructive, there's no evidence for them, but there are people out there in the world, unfortunately, who hold these views. And people who are the subjects of these stereotypes tend to then feel pressure to disprove them. And what happens is there's a dynamic whereby that pressure to disprove the stereotype distracts your attention and actually then degrades your performance. It's a very interesting, I think, very persuasive mechanism that explains more of the destructive effects of the kinds of stereotypes that, again, unfortunately, are out there. This book has been criticized for giving too much evidence. I don't think that's a mistake. I think this is an important enough concept that people needed to be smacked over the head with all the evidence he could muster so that any resistance to these ideas just is defeated and people can get on to thinking about what to do about it. There's a chapter on strategies that is extremely valuable, and I would recommend this book for that reason to anyone, but particularly to students who sort of find themselves in situations where people sometimes are wrongly looking at you and saying, I don't think this kid should be studying hard math. So these are 4 really, really useful books. I encourage you to check them out. I think you'll find that if you take away the best nuggets from each of these, you're going to find yourself in a position of being a much stronger, more effective, more resilient math student. So look them up. Happy mathing.